Good morning. This is Jamaica Live. We're broadcasting on Bridge 99. It's good to be back. It's good to welcome the listeners here in Jamaica. And of course, at noon, we're going to be joined by listeners in the New York area through our sister station, Irie Jam. So, welcome to all of you. It's Monday, July 11th, almost the middle of the month, getting close to independence when we're going to be celebrating 60 years of independence. A time for celebration, a time for reflection as well. But welcome again to the program. I want to talk about something today that is again in the minds of some people. The brutal murder of 4 children and their mother in Cocoa Peace 3 weeks ago has rekindled the debate about the use of the death penalty for persons convicted of murder. It is an argument that surfaces every time there is a murder that is as gruesome and as heinous as this one was. Death by hanging as punishment for certain types of murder is still permitted by the laws of Jamaica. However, over the last 50 years, there has been an intensive campaign by local and international human rights bodies like Amnesty International, as well as international organizations like the United Nations and the European Union, for us to abolish the death penalty. There are only 54 countries in the world that still retain the death penalty, and Jamaica is one of them. 109 countries have abolished the death penalty, removed it completely. 7 other countries retain it only for war crimes. And there are 25 other countries that still have the death penalty on their books, but as a matter of policy, they have decided that it will not be applied. Back in the late 1970s, the government appointed a committee headed by the late Dr. Aubrey Fraser, who was he was a retired jurist from the Trinidad High Court. But he was then the head of the Norman Manley Law School. And he was asked to chair a committee to consider whether the death penalty should be abolished. And having appointed the committee, the government declared a moratorium on hanging pending the committee's report. They said, well, we're not going to hang anybody until we hear from the committee what their recommendations are. The committee published its report in 1981 and recommended that the death penalty be abolished and that all persons on death row should have their sentences commuted to life imprisonment. It is perhaps a twist of irony that 7 years later Dr. Fraser himself was murdered. The death penalty used to be mandatory in Jamaica when a person was convicted of murder. In other words, the judge had no discretion, couldn't give you life imprisonment. Once the jury found you guilty of murder, the punishment was automatically death by hanging. This included murder committed in a fit of anger and what is called a crime of passion, like when you kill your woman because she left you for another man. The law was amended in 1992 to restrict hanging to certain types of murder, what is called capital murder. These include the murder of a member of the security forces, police or soldier, correctional officers, court officials, witnesses, jurors, justices of the peace. It also includes murder committed in the course of robbery, housebreaking, arson, or sexual offenses. or murder involving contract killing. You know, when you pay a man money to go kill somebody. The death penalty is also applicable to murder resulting from an act of terrorism. In all of those circumstances, the punishment upon conviction is supposed to be death by hanging. The judge had no discretion. But that changed in 2004. There was a ruling by the Privy Council in a case involving Lambert Watson, who had been sentenced to death. And the ruling was that to condemn a person to die without giving him the opportunity to appeal to the court, that the sentence of death was disproportionate to the crime, that constituted a violation of his constitutional right. That was the ruling of the Privy Council. And as a result, the government in 2004 amended the law to remove the mandatory provision and to leave it to the judge to decide whether the death sentence should be imposed. Prior to that as well, the application of the death sentence was affected by the Privy Council ruling in that famous Pratt and Morgan case. When a person is convicted of murder and sentenced to death, he is right away put on death row. That's when the clock starts to tick. But he has the right of appeal to the Jamaican Appeal Court. And if he doesn't succeed there, he has a right to appeal to the Privy Council. All those appeals take time. In addition to that, if he fails at the Privy Council, he can appeal to certain international human rights bodies, like the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And Jamaica is a signatory to the convention which set up that body. So all of that takes up more time. In the Pratt and Morgan case, the Privy Council ruled that if you are kept on death row for more than 5 years, you should not be hanged, because to have you there for 5 years waiting to be executed, that was inhumane, cruel punishment. So that if you spend more than 5 years, you shouldn't be hanged, but your sentence should be commuted to life imprisonment. This changed again because our justice system grinds so slowly that the 5 years would run out long before you have exhausted all of these channels of appeal. Now, because the issue of the death penalty was so contentious, with strong views for and equally strong views against it, when I was Prime Minister, I placed the matter before Parliament in November of 2008. And did so on the basis that members would not have to toe a party line, but they would be free to vote according to their individual consciences. In the House of Representatives, the vote was 34 in favor of retaining the death penalty and 15 against it. 15 wanted to have it abolished. A similar vote was taken in the Senate, and the result was 10 in favor of retaining it and 7 wanting it to be abolished. Now, based on the votes in both the House and the Senate supporting the retention of the death penalty, the government in 2009 removed the moratorium on hanging which had been imposed from the time when the Aubrey Fraser Committee was appointed to look into the matter. When the new Charter of Rights was enacted in 2010, bearing in mind the ruling of the Privy Council in the Pratt and Morgan case, Parliament sought to avoid this 5-year rule by stipulating that the sentence of death did not violate the Constitution purely on the basis of the time that elapsed between conviction and execution. In other words, Parliament was now clearing the way for execution of people convicted of capital murder who are sentenced to death by the judge for those to proceed. Yet the death penalty in Jamaica has remained frozen. The last time anyone was hanged for murder in Jamaica was in February of 1988 when two men, Nathan Foster and Stanford Dinnell, were executed at the St. Catherine District Prison. The Privy Council raised the bar even higher in 2009 in a St. Vincent case from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, involving Daniel Trimmingham, who was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in 2004. And in that case, the Privy Council overturned the death sentence, arguing that such a sentence should only be applied in the most extreme and exceptional instances. What the Privy Council called the murder that was committed would have to be what they say, the worst of the worst, the rarest of the rare. And before imposing such a sentence, the judge must compare the offense with other murder cases and not just with ordinary civilized behavior. In addition, it ruled that such a sentence should only be imposed where there is no reasonable prospect of the offender being reformed, and the character of the offender must be taken into account. Now, how does a judge make that determination? How does he arrive at a conclusion that this convict, who the evidence shows committed the murder, is beyond redemption? I don't know how a judge is going to determine that. People will come forward to say that this was a good youth who grew up in Sunday school. He was manageable. Never had a previous conviction. So against this criteria, it is now almost impossible for any judge to impose the death sentence on a convicted murderer. The conditions that have to be met are almost impossible to satisfy and still sentence the person to death. The debate on retaining or abolishing the death penalty has many arguments. Some people argue that it is an effective deterrent, that if you know you might be hanged, you would think twice, thrice, several times before you kill somebody. Others argue that it is not a deterrent, and they back that up with statistics, showing that in countries where the death penalty has been abolished, there has been no increase in murders, in the murder rate. In fact, they argue the murder rate has declined. They also provide statistics showing that many countries where executions are still carried out, they have a higher murder rate than countries where the death penalty has been abolished. My own position has varied. Killing somebody by legal execution is a serious thing. I worry about whether the system ensures that the person who is sentenced to death actually committed the murder. There are many cases I've seen in the United States where many years after the person is executed, it is discovered, often by DNA evidence and sometimes by too late witness testimony, that the person who was executed did not commit the crime. I wonder and I worry whether the same thing has not happened here in Jamaica, only that it has never been discovered. I would have sleepless nights if I played a part in the execution of a person who was later discovered to have been wrongfully convicted. Because you can't correct that. You can't undo his execution. Our justice system is far from perfect. I am not prepared to swear that when a person is convicted, it is absolutely certain that he was guilty. He may not have had good legal representation, which most people cannot afford. Very often they have to depend on legal aid, and that does not guarantee the best possible representation in court. The jury may well be biased or driven by emotion rather than by evidence. And then again, when a murder trial is held 5 years, 6 years, 8 years after the murder was committed, people's memories tend to become wobbly, and the accuracy of witness evidence can be suspect. And yet, when I see the kind of killing that took place in Cocoa Peace, I ask myself, why should that killer, if he is found and convicted, why should that killer be allowed to continue to live, to enjoy life, even if he's locked up behind bars, when 4 little children and their mother were not allowed to also enjoy life? The truth is, however, that it is not the severity of the punishment, even death by hanging, that is going to deter someone from committing murder. What will deter that person from committing murder is the certainty that if you kill somebody, you will be caught. That is the root of our murder crisis in Jamaica. Most of the murderers in Jamaica are never caught. Let me give you some numbers to make the point. Over the last 5 years, 7,059 people were murdered in Jamaica. The last 5 years. 7,059. In 4,376 of those cases, more than half of them, the murderer was never caught. So if a murderer knows that he's not likely to be caught, he will commit the murder anyway, no matter what penalty will be applied, even hanging. Because if you can't catch him, you can't hang him. The death penalty, should we retain it and vigorously enforce it? Or should we abolish it altogether and accept that if a person is convicted of murder, no matter how heinous and brutal, he should be put away for life with a long period before being eligible for parole, if ever being eligible for parole. That is our discussion for today. That's what we're going to be talking about, and we have some special guests lined up who are going to help us to talk about the issues, to look at all the various aspects of it, to ventilate the arguments, and to see whether we can help you, A, to better understand these issues, and either influence your view or confirm the view that you have, but help you to better make your own informed judgment and opinion. And I'm pleased now to welcome to the program Miss Carla Gallotta, she's the Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica. That is a human rights focused NGO that operates in Jamaica, and I know she has been very outspoken in terms of the death penalty and whether we should retain it. Ms. Gallotta, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me. Thanks a lot.
The death penalty, you have some very strong views on it. You want to share those views with us?
Yes, with pleasure. What I wish to do, and I hope that everybody's in agreement, is to reason together. Because sometimes there are problems that are arising where there is something particularly brutal which happened in the country. What happened to the mother of 4 and the 4 children was horrifying, right? Horrifying. And I think that everybody felt it as an offense which cannot be healed, because she was a young mother, 4 little children, the last one was an infant. I think that every person in this country has been feeling outraged, including myself. And I was really thinking how this happened. But what I'm looking at, it is, first of all, unluckily, that for sure was one of the worst episodes, but it was not the only one. And in the weeks before, in the weeks after, we have been keeping reading and learning about family family fight, fathers be killed by young son, mothers be killed by a teenager. The episodes of violence which we are experiencing, especially in the last couple of years, they ring an alarm about an increased amount of violence in Jamaica. So what I'm looking at, it is an amount of elements. The first one is, if violence is increasing, did anybody try to find out the roots of the problem? Unless you want to tell me that 80% of the people are natural born criminal, which I don't think that is the fact, right? We should really be humble enough to find out where violence is rooted, where crimes are committed. And there is a data which is very important to bring to light. Young offenders are more than before. And when I talk about young offenders, there are people which are still children, 13, 12, which are committing crimes such as murderers. There was a case which was brought to attention of the public by the DPP last week, which was a 13 years old which has been killing a 9 years old. And there is a huge amount of episodes of violence in the schools which show teenagers fighting with teachers, show teenagers struggling with knives among themselves. I think that it is alarming, and it needs a country response. It cannot be the response of a human rights NGO or a civil society group or an agency alone.
What should that response be?
The response is, to me, I don't want to say that I have the truth in my hand, but I think that the major response is to find out, as I said, the roots of violence. And we as many of the human rights groups, we are working in those vulnerable communities, and we see some recurrent elements. First of all, lack of parenting. Second, lack of guidance. Third, no schooling. Fourth, no education. Fifth, no jobs. All of that is creating a frame where murder becomes the only way to deal with life, because it's the only way they know.
And when that happens, where should the consideration be directed? It is to be directed on the unfortunate circumstances in which that murderer grew up, and therefore we try to see if we can understand why he came to do something like this. The persons who are opposed to the death penalty argue, for example, that it is cruel and inhumane, it's a violation of his human rights. But I don't even want to talk now about the rights of the victim, because that doesn't need much argument. But what about the rights of the society? I mean, there are some countries, for example, in South America, in Asia, in Africa, there are some countries that take the view that whatever may have driven you to it, whether it is bad parenting, whether it is some cultism, whatever the circumstances, you did something that is a violation of the society. You have put yourself in a position now where you are a threat to the society, and therefore the society feels that it has an obligation to itself to eliminate you so that that threat no longer exists. Why is that argument not a sound argument?
Well, if I can finish 1 second, then I reach the death penalty. What I think that is, you asked me before what is needed. I think what is needed is to admit that what was supposed to be set in place for those communities has not been fully done. Opportunities are not there. the famous projects which were promised at the beginning of the first SOE, they never were fully implemented. So that are missing goals. And I think we should be humble enough to say that that was a failure and that has been creating a lot of monsters. One. Talking about death penalty now, obviously, as a human rights defendant, I do not like death penalty because I don't think that is a solution. There are some things which make me think, and I want to share them with you. The first one is, if we, as you mentioned before, and I agree with you, there are crimes which are at the level of violence which are beyond any possibility to be understood. Those are committed by those which decide to live illegally and breaking the rules and breaking the rule and breaking the heart of most of the people, right? But there is a other side of the country which is representing what is legal. And I think that if we decide that we tell everybody, do not kill, I think everybody's in agreement, right? Do not kill is a principle, and we fully share it, do not kill. But if the state kills, it opens the opportunity to state that somehow it's still possible. So I'm looking at the fact that there must be a principle to defend, and the principle cannot be infringed. Otherwise, what is the difference between a murder and somebody which is accepting to kill to defend itself from murderers?
I will offer one. I mean, the state has the power and the authority to deprive me of my liberty by arresting me and putting me in a jail cell.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I have the power as well as a citizen. If I have a difficulty with somebody to go arrest them and lock them up in my storeroom, I don't have that power. That power is reserved to the state.
That's why I was mentioning the fact that there are the two sides of the country. There is the side which is representing law and order and a vision, and there is the second side, which is the one which is breaking all rules. And I don't think that they should behave in the same way. So, for example, looking at those which have been committed murder, I am aware that there is a number of them which are out on bail, and I suggest that should be used with caution, because if somebody has been killed one time, he might be willing to kill a second time. So it would be quite fair to use the bail with some discretion and avoid to send them back on the road, especially those which have been committing more than one crime and they're serial, etc.
Interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, well, I don't know why. Excuse me if I smile, but I don't know why. I was reading somewhere that human rights people defend criminals. We don't. We work with the victims. In our office, in our little office, we have hundreds of people coming, and there are women which have been raped, children which have been abused, other people which have been suffering for lack of access to justice. And we make sure that we defend them and we provide them with legal representation. And we would love to see those which are the perpetrators properly locked up. We don't want to see them on the street. But we don't even want to see a jungle justice. That's the difference. Okay. If somebody has done something wrong, he needs to be apprehended. He needs to pay for what he has done, because there is a victim on the other side which has been damaged. So we cannot say, okay, that's not important, that is relevant. But the difference is, let's behave according to the law. Let's behave in a way that we set an example, that we set the rules, and we want for everybody to stick with those. Otherwise, we really risk what I was calling before jungle justice. There is an episode which I think about sometimes. Probably you remember when there was a rapist in St. Thomas, right? Which has done something horrible and raped young little girls. And one day, somebody in the same area has found the man and decided that it was him.
Yes, I remember that.
I don't want to forget it.
Well, we're not
It
talking
is
about
one of the...
we're not talking about jungle justice here. We're talking about whether or not the state should have the right in particular cases to carry out executions. Miss Gallotta, thank you so much for sharing your views with us this morning.
You're very welcome.
We're going to continue the discussion, but thank you so much. Miss Carla Gallotta, Executive Director of Stand Up for Jamaica. We take a short break. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We're talking today about the efficacy of the death penalty. Well, even more than the efficacy, we're really talking about whether or not it should be retained or whether it should be abolished. There's a lot of pressure for abolishing it. We haven't executed anybody in Jamaica in, 30-odd years, since 1988. So that's what we're talking about today. And we're pleased now to be joined by someone. He's a family physician, a regular columnist in the Gleaner, Dr. Garth Rattray. Dr. Rattray, welcome to the program. Do we have him on? No, I gather we're trying to make contact with him. He has expressed some views on the matter. I'm anxious to have him share them with us and perhaps give us a clinical view. But the debate continues to rage. As I said, the way in which the Privy Council has raised the bar, it is virtually impossible now for the death sentence to be imposed, even if a jury is absolutely convinced that this is a heinous case. Dr. Rattray, welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, sir. I'm hanging in there.
Tell me something. The death penalty, is it an effective, is it an appropriate and effective punishment for certain types of murders? I mean, like the kind we saw in Coca Peace a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
In a case, for example, where somebody shoots randomly into a crowded shop and kill 4 or 5 people. What's your view?
Well, nothing I've read shows that it is effective, because this is something that we're all going to experience. And if you're going to, it's something we're going to learn from. You can't learn from death after this is over. It's something that we're going to learn. Plus, as regards being a deterrent, nothing I've read again shows that it's a deterrent. In fact, they said long-term prison sentences is just as good a deterrent as the death penalty. No, in fact, it's even better. So the trick about this thing is to get the person caught and convict them for long prison sentences. But death penalty has not been proven to be effective to deter this kind of crime, no matter how heinous it may seem.
What impact, from your medical experience?
Yes.
What impact, if for example, someone were to be executed in Spanish Town today?
Yes.
What impact would that have on the society?
You have a mixed impact in us there. Some people would be glad about it because that's revenge, basically. And that's not something we want, because revenge is something that we shouldn't be encouraging in society, because then, of course, it will get even worse among our people. So people be happy for that and say, well, yes, he is dead now. But the other society will say, but hold on a second now. Are we better than these people? We are killing 2. How can you kill to say don't kill? It doesn't make any sense at all. But what actually bothers me, sir, with other things too, this is serious to me, aside from everything else, who will hang from our rope? Will they ever hang somebody who is rich enough to afford a good lawyer, get a good defense, or somebody who is popular? You know what I mean? So who will be dangling from the end of our rope? Somebody who can't afford these things, somebody who probably is innocent and don't have the defense attorney. So it begs the question, is it fair across the board? And is it really effective? No. Deterrent? No.
Well, in opening the discussion, I expressed my concern as to whether or not I can't be 100% sure that when somebody is convicted, he really is guilty.
No, that's.
I mean, we have seen many cases in America where DNA evidence or testimony given years after indicates that the person was wrongfully convicted, but then you have executed him already.
Yes, and like I said, if he's rich, he probably will. He has a better chance of being proven not guilty, even when he's really not guilty. And not guilty people. I have a patient right now who has a problem, and his lawyer is not. He's supposed to be out case lawyers. He's headed straight for prison, and he's not. The little thing I'm seeing in the report, he needs a good lawyer, and this is a simple thing. So, matter of life and death, sir, I don't agree with hanging because, like I said, it doesn't, except for revenge, which is bad for society. It serves no other useful purpose. In fact, to tell you something, people don't know.
But I would probably challenge you. Not in terms of my own argument, but for example, there are countries that I looked at over the weekend where they take a view that the rights of the community supersede the rights of the individual.
Yes.
And they claim that somebody who commits murder, that's an offense against the community. That threatens the security of the community. And therefore, in order to preserve the community's right, the society's right, they need to eliminate that person and remove that threat. Almost like a wasp that is going to sting you or stung you. You want to kill it.
But, first of all, that argument doesn't hold water because you can get them out of the community by putting them in prison for the rest of their lives. That's taking them out of the community. This will serve the same purpose. That's what people are saying. It serves no useful purpose for deterrent.
So what you're saying, I mustn't kill the wasp, I must put him in a little cage so him can't bite me.
Well, sir,
but then I have to keep him and I have to feed him and give him water.
Well, sir, you open a whole new bag of worms, because all these things, society blame, it's our society, People might be born with the problem, the sort of mental wiring for these violence, but if they were showing love and respect as children in a good upbringing, it wouldn't be like this, It would not be like this. It's our failing as a society that has created these monsters. So there you go again.
But Garth, what do? You have a dog. You have raised the dog.
Yes.
The dog has been a good and faithful dog. Yes. And all of a sudden, one day the dog gets mad and bites you.
Yes.
What do? Do you forgive the dog or do you put it down?
Well, that dog is insane. That needs to be treated like an insane dog. The fact of the matter is that in society, they have proven that, it's a long story, too long for this program, but they have proven that even somebody has that kind of predilection to be a sociopath, a kind of person who will kill people, if they're in a good environment, which we would all like to have. Many of us had it as children. That's an environment where people curse you, where you hear murder around you every day and violence and calling you and putting them down and cursing the children. That kind of thing fosters just evil. And they don't have love for us because we didn't show love for them. And so we are the persons who created these people. So we really are at fault. Anyway, take it right at fault, really.
You're sure you're not being soft?
No, I'm being practical, sir, because, like I said, this program is too short to go into that detail. But we know for a fact, okay, let me tell you. I grew up in Greenwich Town, but it wasn't the kind of Greenwich Town it is today. So you had people around. If I went on the street and did something, people come to me and say, no, you're doing something wrong, or people look out for you. That's not the way it is today. You know that, sir. People, it's an aggression to the level where I couldn't stand it now. So people their whole thinking is that aggression and man trouble you dust him or you kill him or you make him that duppy. That's the way they grew up. So turn around now and say, well, this person is, kill them. It just doesn't serve them. And besides, by the way, I was going to say something a while ago. Hanging, this is what we tend to use. It's a very quick way to die. It's not like nobody suffers. If the person tie the rope and strangle themselves, hanging, a little bone called a dental process, slides back and cut the spinal cord. It's instant, They're not like the person are good and going to suffer. They don't suffer. But the whole principle of killing somebody that's wrong. It's just revenge. That's all it turns out to be, is revenge.
Revenge or removing a threat?
Well, like I said, sir, prisons can remove the threats. That's another entire story. Because our prisons are not good at that, there are people in there who get nicknames like headless because they took out people's heads.
Yeah.
There are parties in there, and we need to have people in white clothes and slippers, and nothing comes in there except the prison food that the prison will give them. No parties or anything. And so people in there come out as if they went to university and graduate. So we are producing people in there and reinforcing badness because they, you know what I mean? So we have a lot of work to do in our society. So
I'm not lacking appreciation of your arguments, It's just that something keep gnawing at the back of my head. And that is, you may have grown up in unfortunate circumstances. Maybe you grew up in a home where violence was commonplace and every day. Father used to beat the hell out of you, and used to beat your mother too. So you learn from you're a little kid. You're just aggressive, and you just want to beat and so on, and you eventually become a murderer.
Yes.
But however you came to that point, there are consequences for your action. You just killed my mother. I almost grew up without a mother. And there are consequences for your action, and fine. Maybe your father is to blame and so on, but did you commit the murder, not your father?
Yes, and the consequences is to put the person out of society, put them away, lock them away, and that's how they deal with it. Instead of killing, it's just I can't understand why somebody would kill somebody. It's no revenge. Killing no revenge, because we're all going to die, and it doesn't serve people a lesson, because they don't suffer by the way. I tell you again. And the fact of the matter is that it's not a deterrent, so it doesn't make sense. Society removes them by giving them long prison sentences, even life in prison. That's all removed.
Well, we effectively have. I mean, one could say we have effectively abolished the death penalty, because we haven't hanged anybody since 1988. But the murders continue relentless.
Yes,
I made a point earlier, that it's not the severity of the punishment that is going to deter murder. It's the question of the certainty of being caught.
Exactly. Exactly, sir. If you catch people, it will stop. You apprehend people enough, you're perfectly right. That's what you need to do.
You might not have heard the numbers I gave out earlier. Well, let me just repeat them. Over the last 5 years, 7,059 people were murdered in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Of that 7,059 murder cases, in 4,376 of them, the murderer still has not been caught.
Whoa.
More than half. Well, more than half.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I want to dust a man, and I have good reason to believe that the chances of my being caught are remote,
yes,
I'm going to go dust him.
Yeah, but sir, you know that the reason not caught because nobody is turning them in. People know this enough. Somebody knows to those things enough. The same society is crying out and carrying on. Somewhere in there are the same people who harbor these criminals and these murderers. That is why they're not being caught. So unless society decides, I've had enough, then start turning them in and giving them up, going to be suffering. You're right, just the same.
But part of the problem too is that even though that might be inclined to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an experience. Years ago, when I used to be MP in Spanish Town, there was a murder. There was one woman who witnessed the murder.
Yeah.
And the police told me that they've been trying to get her to come and give a statement, and she won't.
Yeah.
And I went. And I used my influence on her because she was one of my good supporters. Mm-hmm. And I persuaded her. Mm-hmm. And I actually drove her myself to the police station and waited for her to give the statement.
Yes.
About 3 weeks after that, she was killed.
Yes.
And I've carried that burden.
I know.
On me, because if I hadn't pressured her to give the statement, she probably would have been alive today.
That's true. I fully agree with you, sir. But that's why all these secret numbers and things that they can call, I just give a hint.
But how does the state? But Garth, how does the state protect? For every murder, there may be 3-4 witnesses.
Yes.
How does the state protect? Thousands of witnesses. Where you put them?
Well, the thing about it is that if they actually catch them, let's say even apprehend them, and they'll be caught and pushed through the system. That alone, I think, if they don't get a chance to go fully to trial and everything, but just think about it to bust on them, in other words. I hate you to be informed because that word has not been solid. Bust on them and say, look here, this man, I did see money from stealing the crime, on a telephone secret thing, and actually catch the man. And I find on him, and that's it.
Senior homicide detectives have told me
yes.
that in most of these murders, not all, but in most of them, they have information as to who do it.
Yes.
But they can't present information to the court. They have to present evidence.
Yes.
And they can't present the evidence because nobody is prepared to come and sign and know that they're going to have to go to court. And they probably have to go to court 15, 16, 17 times to give evidence. And every day they have to wake up and wonder or not whether them go and burn down them house tonight because them give evidence.
I know, but honestly, I understand what you're saying. Don't get me wrong. I know I have a friend who was killed, and her brother was killed before because he would testify. I won't call their name because I don't want to break up anything. But the fact of the matter is that there are ways to get the secret done, and there are ways to protect a few of them, and just to know that they might get people might talk about it. That is somewhat because you can't catch all of them, sir. We'll never be able to catch all of them. We know, but at least we catch more. At least we go in a certain direction. Maybe we'll have the reverse where you have 3,000 not caught and 4,000 caught. Even that will let people know, more than half of us are going to get caught for doing something, for killing people. So we can start somewhere, I'm thinking.
Have you in your own writings, because I know your mind goes way beyond just your medical practice. In your own writings, have you observed any particular strategy that any country faced with our problem has employed that has made an impact on the murder figures?
Not countries like ours. Well, yes and no. Not countries like ours. The countries that can do things that we cannot do because of our constitution, they can stop it. They can do things like that. And other countries do it, but they start to infringe on people's rights. And then you have a problem. So
I remember years ago, Lee Brown, who was police commissioner in New York, visited Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And I met with him. And I was, of course, he came here with a hell of a impressive record of having reduced crime in New York significantly while he was commissioner. And I asked him how he did it. And he said it was a mixture of things: community policing, more strict enforcement, zero tolerance, and social intervention, creation of opportunities, training, and whatnot. And I said to him, what would you regard as the most important of these various elements of the strategy? He said social intervention. Yeah. I said, well, yeah, but that must have cost a lot of money. He said, yes, it cost a lot of money. It was funded by both the state and city and federal government. Our problem, of course, is how do we do that in Jamaica? What am I to do? To say, well, all right, I'm going to have to shift some money from the hospitals in order to boost up the social intervention so that people stop killing one another? Must I shut down some schools in order to do that? I can't make those choices.
I know. But something, sir, I'm not talking now because this is part of extrapolating. I believe that there are people who would actually volunteer themselves to become people who intervene socially. But something that I've always thought, sir, if we get back discipline and order on our street, where a man knows if you go through the light, if you do so and so, then the whole mindset of order and discipline will work. It will, like I say, retrofit their psyche.
That's a broken glass concept.
Yes. Just make sure people know that, listen, this country has discipline and order. You can't be driving on the soft road on that side of the road, a taxi man, or taking a whole line. So their law, our law is nothing to them. That I have always thought is one of the reasons why we have problems in this country, sir.
Garth, I'm in trouble. I'm up on the 12 o'clock break. But thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, let's take the break. Today we're talking about the death penalty, whether or not we should retain it, whether we should retain it or whether we should abolish it. And there are, as I said, strong views on both sides of that argument. And I want to welcome now to the program, I hope we have him on, Bishop Rowan Edwards. He's pastor in Spanish Town. The Lighthouse Assembly is the name of his church. He's a leader of that congregation. And he has expressed some very strong views on the matter. And we're anxious to have him on so that we can discuss with him. Is he on? Bishop Edwards.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
How are you? Not bad at all, sir. Good to hear you, sir.
It's nice to have you on the program.
Yes, sir.
When you remember that terrible killing we had up in Quokopee 3 weeks ago?
Yes, sir.
Where 4 little children and their mother were slaughtered. If we catch a person who did it and the person is convicted in accordance with the laws of the country, should we hang him?
That is a very broad subject, Mr. Golden, it's a very broad subject, and quite a lot of people are discussing this as we speak because of the gruesomeness of the matter. One is thinking, should we allow a man like that to be in our prisons and we're taking care of him, feeding him for the rest of his life? He doesn't work again. A lot of talks are surrounding this matter.
Well, even deeper than that, should we allow him to enjoy life?
Well, as I'm saying, they're putting a man in prison now, is to some of these guys who are out there, they don't mind being in prison, because they don't have to pay rent, they don't have to buy food, they just stay in there, So,
and some of them having a good time in there.
They're playing games and watching television and enjoying
and recording music.
And recording music, making money while they're in prison. And at the same time, they're doing their hits right there. They're doing quite a lot while in prison. So, but Mr. Golden, I don't know if you have done the research to see how many of these kind of guys that are out there. How many of them? Is it 20,000 of them? Is it 50,000 of these guys? It's 100,000 of them out there. Have we taken the time to work a figure to say how many men like those are out there who are murderers, who are hot-blooded murderers? We know we have done some studies and discovered that roughly 395 gangs are in the island, right? We have done that study. We've discovered that. How many of these gangs have how many men, and how many men are like that? Okay? How many shatters we have? Now, when we do our calculation, we'll have to come up with something to say, well, if it's 50,000 men who are out there that are like this one, will we kill all 50 of them? 50,000 of them?
Well, suppose it's not 50,000. Suppose it's 400.
Suppose 400. All right, say it's 1,000 of them. Will you kill all of them? All right? But one thing I've discovered, Mr. Golden, is that because of the trend of what we saw has been taking place over the years, we know what is, well, apart from the case where the one in Cocoa Peach, because I'm heading to down there now. I've been dealing with the matter, right? Say that is a family feud, domestic issues. But we have to think, what is the main pusher of murder in Jamaica? What are behind it? Well, we've discovered that is scamming and extortion and family feud, domestic violence. So they're the three things that they said pushing the murder rate up, all right? Now, what caused all of this to be taking place? We have to do some serious research. The church has been doing some serious research to come up with ideas and how to solve the problem.
I want to explore that with you, but can I ask you to just allow me to bring in the New York listeners, because we joined them at this time?
Yes,
and so all the Jamaicans in New York will be hearing you. Beauregard, how are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Golden.
We're talking about the death penalty today. Is this a big conversation up in New York?
Well, here in the United States, in New York especially, we no longer have the death penalty.
You don't?
No, we don't. Not since 2007, where the last remaining death sentence was reduced to life.
Uh-huh.
So, but here in the United States, about 27 states still have the death penalty. And
like Texas, I believe?
Yeah, some of those states. Virginia being the last state to abolish the death penalty as well. And about 60% of Americans are for the death penalty.
Are for it?
Yes. They're in favor.
Do you know if any poll was done in the New York area, so what their views are?
No, not state by state, but it was said that the whole entire America, 60%.
60%. Part of the issue, part of the reason why the issue becomes so difficult to kind of nail down. I mean, you remember the Timothy McVeigh case, for example.
Yes.
Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, there's somebody who did something like that. I can't remember how many people died in that. Let us say, for example, that Bin Laden was caught alive. What would people say in relation to him? No, you shouldn't execute him. Lock him up for life?
No, that's not the consensus here in the United States. A lot of people felt that Bin Laden sort of committed the ultimate crime against America when he attacked on 9/11. You know, so many Americans would want to see him die or hang, or they're pleased with the outcome right now.
A point that I've been making, though, is that certainly in Jamaica, and I suspect it would apply anywhere, it is not the severity of the punishment that will dissuade a murderer, even if that punishment is execution. It is whether or not he's likely to be caught, and in Jamaica our record is very poor in terms of catching them.
True indeed, and also when catching them you also have to get a conviction.
That's right, and in order to get the conviction you need more than just information, you have to get evidence.
Yes, indeed, and then you need the citizens who are afraid to help the peace officers and police officers.
And some of them for good reason.
Yes, because they feel that they're also, giving information back to criminals.
Yes.
Some of them.
What's the weather like up there, Bo?
The weather is in the 70s today, sir.
That's good. That's good. You haven't had any heat wave in New York?
Not since the last about 2 weeks.
Oh, you had one?
Yes, we had some showers over the weekend, but they're starting to warm up back again.
Yeah, okay. Well, big up everybody up there for me.
True indeed, and we'll be listening. This is a very good conversation, and I feel like a lot of Jamaicans are listening, and they have a lot to say on this topic. So we're here, and we'll listen to the outcome of this conversation.
Well, we're talking now with Bishop Rowan Edwards, who is head of the Lighthouse Assembly, which is a big congregation out in Spanish Town. And later on, we're going to be talking to Mr. Mickel Jackson, who is the Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice. So we're trying to canvass the views, trying to see if we can help people to better understand the issues and make up their own minds, as we do every time here. Thank you so much, Bo.
No problem, sir.
Bishop Edwards.
Yes, sir, Golden. No,
New York is listening to you now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So welcome to our friends in New York. Yes, sir. No, I was saying that we got to a place in Jamaica right now which is dangerous. The murder rate is out of control. We've been seeing some bad things happening in Jamaica, and we're the worst in the Caribbean now as it relates to murder. Now, killing, putting back the murder, the capital punishment through hanging, or whatever means they will use. I'm just thinking if it will deter the guys from doing what they're doing. We have had discussion on this matter on various levels. And as you heard, our friend from New York said that quite a number of states have abolished the death penalty, and remaining states could be 27, right? Because what they have found out that using the death penalty does not deter people from doing what they're doing. What I want to do is to get to the base of the problem. What is the source of Jamaica's problem? We have 5 people bearing on the 31st, including 4 children that were murdered. All right? Through a domestic matter. We have to look at what is pushing the whole aspect of murder in Jamaica and get to the source of it. And when we get to the root of the matter, then that's when we have to deal with it. And
but there's another issue here, though, Bishop.
Yeah.
Because some of the murderers, we kind of helped to create them, no?
We created them.
Because of the circumstances in which they were forced to grow up in. Mm-hmm. But then, if I use the analogy, I have a dog, right? I don't treat the dog well. So the dog is not very friendly towards me. And one day the dog get bad and grab me by my throat. I managed to survive. But what do I do with that dog? Do I say, well, boy, I stay with you because I really should have treated you better? Or do I put that dog down because he's now a threat to my life?
Of course, it is said that's how it ought to be. Put him down. But then, are dogs human beings? One has to question that.
Well,
so, Mr. Golden.
One of the questions you have to ask is whether some of these murderers are human beings too.
You have to, but look here, Mr. Golden. As I said, Jamaica, the church is right now calling for, in the term of fixing an engine, overhaul Jamaica. We have to look back on a restart of Jamaica. And I'm using the death of these 5 persons to make that call. From the politician to the pastors to the security forces to the business community, everybody has to sit around the table and look at how we can restart the country. Because where we are now is bad. And looking at the death penalty is one thing. But I'm saying you have to kill 1,000 of them, or 2,000 of them, or 30,000 of them.
All right, let me ask you this: have you yourself, or any of your pastoral colleagues, ministered to anybody in prison who was convicted of murder?
Many times I've gone into the prison and deal.
What kind of sense you get when you talk to them? Are they remorseful? Do they accept that they did something that was terribly wrong, or just feel that boy careless, let them catch them?
Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Golden. Prison don't change these guys. That's what I'm saying. I wanted the death penalty to change them, because if they're in prison and the way how they talk, when they come out, what they're going to do? And how they're going to deal with these guys who deal with them. There's a few of them will go into prison change them. So they're coming back out with revenge. And when they come back with revenge, it's worse than how they went in.
But that is only going to strengthen the argument of those who say, well, we should hang them. Because when you hang them, they can't come back out and trouble nobody.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, the guys are getting worse. Why? Something is fueling the matter. Mr. Golden, I commended you, and up to last week I was talking about you. But you're one of the honest politicians who made a statement some years ago that tried to clear up some stuff. And I commended you on that, right? No. We know that we saw how politicians helped to create this monster, right? We cultivated a Dudus and a Zeus. We cultivated that.
Yeah, no question at all about that. But quite frankly,
we watch these guys multiplying themselves by 400 now.
Yeah.
No,
but one of the things that you must accept,
Yes.
Ecuador, for example, which has is the only country with a higher murder rate than ours. It's not politicians create the murderers over there. That is just the same kind of criminality and the scamming and so on that we have here. So whether the politicians had messed around in the 60s and 70s, we still have had that problem. And my argument is, fine, society has a responsibility. Very often there's an argument about human rights, because even if a man has committed murder, he has not surrendered his human rights. He's still entitled to protection against inhumane treatment, and he's still entitled to due process. There is the other side of the argument. What about the victim's rights? And people are saying, well, the victims have rights too. That is true. But there's a third component that has not been put into the equation, and that is the rights of the society. So
that's where I'm heading.
The society deserves to be able to go to the bed at night without fear that somebody going to kick down them door and murder them. And that is what strengthens the arguments of those who say, well, the only way you can protect a society is to get them out of the system altogether. Now, where the argument diverges is those say, well, get them out altogether, but lock them up for life. Another set will say, well, the money we're spending to keep them in prison for life, that money could send 2 more children to basic school. So what we need to do is just eliminate them because they serve no purpose. They are evil. They can add nothing to society. In fact, they are a threat to society. So let's just eliminate them so that at least there's one less murderer around.
Well, I am not one, Mr. Golden, that is saying that they should not enact the whole aspect of capital punishment to murder, to these guys paying for what they did. Okay? The law of the land, which is our legislators, needs to look carefully, and I leave that to them. All right? I'm not saying do it or don't do it. And nobody can say I say it. But what I'm saying, the law of the land, the legislators, they must look carefully on what is best to deal with the whole matter of reducing murder in Jamaica. And I'm saying that enacting the capital punishment program is one, but they have to look at other things. Because you kill one today, 20 more will rise up. Right? There
are some church leaders who are very, very strongly in favor of capital punishment. I'm sure that you have engaged them in discussions. What is their argument, and how do they reconcile their argument with what Jesus proclaimed in the Sermon from the Mount?
All right. What is happening? There's a division there's a split in the church. And to be honest with you, a couple of years ago, I said that should be the case. That if the man is wicked enough to kill 7 or 8 people one time, then he should be able to bear the punishment for that, which is capital punishment. But when you look back and see what our Lord teaches, I have to be very, very careful how I hold on to that. So therefore, there's a split within the clergy, because there's some of us who believe that Jesus' teaching is different from Moses. Because Moses would say an eye for an eye. Jesus says forgive. Okay? So we have to be very careful, and that's why many of us in the clergy are very careful now as to how we approach this matter.
Bishop.
Yes.
Some of them people that you tell me you have spoken with in the prisons. You can find space to forgive them?
Well, my job is to forgive, and my job is to leave God to do the rest.
If you were called upon to visit the prison tomorrow, and the first one you buck up there is the one who killed off the 4, picking them up in Cocoa Piece and the mother, how much forgiveness you going to carry with you to go give him?
I have to. That's what Jesus taught me. That no matter what that guy did, we have to forgive him. But the law of the land should take care of the rest.
So what we must do is forgive him and punish him.
Well, if I forgive him, but the law of the land says if you commit murder, this is what you'll get paid. You get paid in this way. I can't stop that. It is the law of the land that determines that, not Rowan Edwards. I forgive him, and I say to the family, listen. When I went down there, the TVJ was there, and they did something. That video reached over 250,000 people, and I saw people's tears. I saw them as they make their comments. When I went in the community, the guys in the community said, "Bishop, bring him to us right now. We want to deal with him. No, we don't want no judge deal with him. We want to deal with him ourselves, because the man wicked, and the man supposed to to behave the way civilized Jamaicans behave. He didn't behave that way. But as a pastor, I can't side with them. I have to say, hey, this is what my law teaches, that we have to learn to forgive. But the law of the land is a different matter. If the law of the land said that they should get rid of him, well, the law of the land should stand out. They should stand out, and the law of the land should make sure that things are done to protect the rest of the citizens who are here, who are good law-abiding citizens. We can't allow these men who are out there who have no heart, these men who are wicked, they're bent on doing evil, right? The law of the land must take care of them. My job is to forgive them, but the law of the land should deal with them. This is my theory.
Well, I hear you. I'm just trying to see how much comfort that gives to the family up in Cocoa Peace.
Yeah, but well,
I know it's a tough call. You see,
it's a tough call.
And the truth of the matter is that all the studies that have been done are not that clear. I mean, I believe, and I said it before, that the focus should less be on the severity of the punishment and more on the certainty of being caught. And that is where we fall down, because most of the murderers in Jamaica are not being caught.
I am calling for a rehaul of this nation, a restart of Jamaica. The justice system, the politicians, the church, the business community, everybody has to come together and restart this country. Because when we look back, Mr. Golden, and see that a man who is in prison, and because he terrified his witnesses, and they're afraid to come up and say anything, he's released, and he goes back to do worse. So what are we going to do? We have to look back on the teeth that we put in the law of the land to apprehend these guys and make sure that they pay for what they have done. We can't. I don't have the heart to go and kill somebody because he did something bad. The police department is the one, and the military are the ones that should handle these matters. But the police department themselves are corrupt. I know police who I have to pray for policemen who come to our church because they're going on a raid. They're going on a raid. And the days when Renato Adams used to go on a raid, he come to me with 30 of his men pop on in our church, and he has to take all the phone from the guys. Because where he's going, nobody knows he's going. Because the same guys, then the policemen will call and tell guys ahead of them, move because the police is coming. So the corruption in the force is creating mayhem too, because they're taking bribes. The guys then pay them to keep them out shut, and they continue to do what they're doing. So the law of the land must have teeth, and it's not my job to call for the death penalty. My job is to say the law of the land should carry the strong penalty to cause the guys them to stop and think before they make a move. Jamaica needs, this is what Jamaica needs right now. See, 5 kills for the next 5 months. The church is going to be hitting every community. For the next 5 months, the church is going to be hitting every community. We're calling for the next 5 months for a reduction in the murder rate. And we wouldn't mind that starting for the month of August, that we start seeing a decline for the next 5 months. 5 people, we're going to use these 5 people as a marker to say 5 months left, we want to see a reduction. And we're asking every pastor, every church believer, every believer, every citizen and who are good law-abiding citizens. I'm going to be talking, a matter of fact, Prime Minister is supposed to be at the funeral, the leader of the opposition is supposed to be at the funeral, right? I am in charge of that. I'm putting things together. And we're going to use that opportunity to send a message to all Jamaicans that every Jamaican must come on board to push murder down before the rest of the year.
Hear you.
It's closed.
Hear you loud and clear. Bishop Rowan Edwards, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. God bless you, Sir Bruce. Bye-bye.
Bishop Rowan Edwards, Bishop of the Lighthouse Assembly in Spanish Town, he told us that he'll be conducting a service for the 4 children and their mother who were murdered in Cocoa Peace a couple of weeks ago. We're coming up to the final leg, but we have one more guest. I want to take a break first. Let's take a break and we'll come back. Today we're talking about the death penalty. To hang or not to hang? To hang by the rope or lock them away for life? And we've been canvassing views on the matter. We want to be joined now by Miss Mickel Jackson, who is the Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice. Ms. Jackson, do we have you on the line?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Golding. I trust all is well, and good afternoon to your listeners as well.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Jamaicans for Justice, does it have a formal position on the question of the retention of the death penalty?
Yes, our position has been articulated for years now, actually, as far back as our first executive director, Dr. Caroline Gomes. So our position has remained based on from when we started as an organization, and we are against the utilization of the death penalty for many reasons, but our conversation has always been that the government, given that any system, criminal justice system, is flawed because we're human beings, given that our criminal justice system is under-resourced, we believe that the efforts ought to be focused on fixing those gaps in the justice system, ensure that we have those in who are detained and who are charged to be the right individuals, focused on fixing the investigative powers of the JCF. Those are some of the practical things that we have argued for. But we also remain steadfast in our views that the right to life is a sacrosanct one, and therefore it ought not to be taken by the state.
Is there an, well, put it this way, I share your concern. You see that we have no way of knowing, for example, whether every person who has been convicted of murder in Jamaica was actually rightfully convicted. I mean,
Yes.
there are so many aspects of our judicial process that are wobbly. And as I said at the opening, I would have sleepless nights if I participated in the execution of somebody, only to discover sometime later, whether by DNA evidence or by some subsequent testimony,
Yes.
that it was the wrong person that we executed, because you can't undo that. But tell me, is there an incongruity between defending human rights and supporting the retention of the death penalty? In other words, if you're a human rights organization, is it a situation where you must oppose the death penalty?
I think the views may vary across some human rights organizations, but we wouldn't try to speak for others. For JFJ, we believe that we ought to respect the rights of every single Jamaican citizen. And when you have individuals who violate the rights of others, we do believe that the justice system, through the sentencing guidelines and so on, ought to fit the crime. But we also believe that you should have the right to a fair trial that is just without the recourse to the death penalty. So if it is that you have someone who is convicted of a gruesome murder and they are deserving of life imprisonment, then we believe that that situation ought to be imposed. But we do not believe in state-sanctioned murder, if you want to use a strong language like that.
Well, let me ask you a question, though, and I hope I don't cause you any discomfort. Let us say that bin Laden was captured alive. And let us say at his trial, he said, look, I don't want to get into the whole long trial. I arranged for the man them to board the flight and crash the planes into your buildings and kill off the people. I did it because America wicked.
Yes.
What do you do with a man like that? Life imprisonment?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for the bin Laden situation and terrorism and
Why not?
the good for Jamaica because, again, we're not within that particular jurisdiction. But you do have other organizations such as Amnesty International and so on who would have spoken for them. Within the Jamaican landscape, from our perspective, we are guided by certain principles and certain cases that have been put before the courts. And I'm sure in your discussion, Mr. Golding, you would have talked to others that have mentioned the Trimingham principle that the Privy Council actually upheld in another case called Peter Dugal.
Well, what the Privy Council has done in that particular case, that's the case from St. Vincent, no?
Yes.
What the Privy Council has done is that virtually removed the question of hanging from the discretion of the judge, because no judge can meet those standards that the Privy Council has set.
You
have to make a determination as to whether or not the person is irredeemable. No judge can make that.
And well, that is where our perspective is as an organization, that for now, the position of JFJ is that we oppose the death penalty in all circumstances within the Jamaican landscape. Again, I don't want to speak to another jurisdiction at all.
Well, based on, well, it's not just Trimingham. Trimingham is one, but then also there was the case, the Lambert-Watson case, which also restricted the judge's discretion. So, in effect, capital punishment in Jamaica is, for all intents and purposes, abolished. I don't think there's any way it could be carried out now, not with the position that the Privy Council has taken. And those persons who believe that joining the CCJ will give you an easier route to hanging people need to be mistaken, because the CCJ certainly hasn't, they're not sort of noose ready to hang people.
Yes, I think we can make reference to the case in Barbados where the CCJ has basically given an indication that some of the principles of the Privy Council perhaps will be upheld. But that's another conversation to get into.
I wasn't going there. One of this, something that I want to put on the table, you see. Every now and again you hear people who criticize, like JFJ. They say that JFJ only standing up for the criminal, them, and what about the victims? The victims' rights. Well, there are three components to it as far as I'm concerned. There's the right of the accused, no?
Yes.
Because he has certain human rights, and, even after he's convicted, some of those human rights still retained, no? Isn't that correct?
Some are restricted and some are absolutely retained. Your freedom of movement is restricted, but some of the fundamental ones certainly remain.
There's the right of the victims, and the people who beat upon you are the ones who are saying that nobody talking about the victims, and the victims have rights. But there's a third set of rights, and that is the rights of the society, the community.
Absolutely. Yes.
And a society deserves to be assured that they are not going to be easily exposed to somebody just coming into a house and killing our 4 children and the mother. Now, there are some jurisdictions in Africa, in Asia, some in South America, that take the view that if the evidence concludes to the satisfaction of a jury or whatever is their system, that you really went in and you murdered the 4 children and the mother, that you are such a danger to society. You have so offended the society that in order to protect the society, you must be eliminated. And therefore you are executed, lethal injection, whatever. A crude analogy is that, look, if a mosquito sting me, and I still see that mosquito, what do I do? So, well, boy, I was careless to allow you to sting me, or do I swash it and kill it? Now, you say, well, a mosquito is a mosquito, a human is a human, but a man who go in and murder 4 little children and their mother, him don't demand any more respect from me than a wasp.
I'm happy that you put it within the context of the rights of the wider society. because I think that's where we also have to go. And we have taken the position that once you start something, you may very well go down a slippery slope that you don't want as a country, I should say. Now, as we started earlier, we recognize
Can I interrupt you? I'm being told we have to take a short commercial break. Can you just hold for me?
That's fine. Thank you.
It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99 in the final stretch. Are we talking about the death penalty today, whether we should do away with it or whether we should retain it? And we have online Miss Mickel Jackson, who is the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice. I had interrupted you, and I wanted you to pick up from where we had left off.
Yes, thanks for that. The point I was making is that I'm happy that you mentioned the wider society and where their rights fit in and the implications for the reimposition of a death penalty. I think we have to look globally in terms of who will be most impacted if a death penalty is to be reimposed. And we can't get away from the fact that we're talking about the most marginalized, the poor Jamaican citizens. And again, we believe that we may very well be going down a slippery slope. When we look at the high levels of violence in the country and whether or not a death penalty reimposition would actually prevent crimes like these, and we're not assured of that. Again, we go back globally to other countries. Just last week, I was reading a report wherein a number of the states in the U.S., they have declined their utilization of the death penalty as high as 75%, right, we're seeing. So countries that value democracy, they're moving away from it, not focusing on reimposing it. So we believe that we ought to be focusing on preventative measures. Now, the Ministry of Justice, for example, they have excellent programs, the child diversity policy, the restorative justice work. If you remember the PULSE program a few years ago, how do we scale up some of these programs so we see a decline of the violence in the society rather than us clamoring for, as I mentioned, state-sanctioned murder? I think we have to go away from that because the country, the state, a democratic country cannot be focusing on retribution rather than looking at how we fix the criminal justice system. I had mentioned rehabilitation as something that we ought to be focusing on, and I think persons perhaps misunderstood that we were saying rehabilitate and not put the person behind bars if it is that they were found guilty. But even if you're serving a life imprisonment, we believe that the justice system ought to be focusing on ensure that people are reformed and we see a better version of who they are.
Well, I had Bishop Rowan Edwards on before you came on.
Yes.
And he said he has visited and engaged with prisoners behind bars. And he said that they show no remorse. They are bitter, they are angry. They're anxious to get out because some people who cause them to be behind bars, they're going to fix for them business. Mm-hmm. You talk about intervention and the programs that are being pursued by the Ministry of Justice. What effect can those programs have on somebody who right now, he's 21 years old, he has a brand new BMW driving around with, which he acquired through a lot of scamming.
Yes.
And then find that somebody thief him scamming list, that him work hard to put together. And then therefore decide that he must go dust out that person.
Yes.
What kind of intervention program is going to impact him?
You know, and let me start with the comment by the Reverend that you mentioned. We have agencies, and I think you had Stand Up for Jamaica on the program today as well. And they have excellent initiatives. Now, I'm not talking about a feel-good, idealistic exercise. We know these things take time, and we know they take resources, and so on. Again, it's a matter of what we're clamoring for as a society and where we want to go as a country. You mentioned a lot of scamming. We're seeing where children as young as 13 years old in high school are involved in a lot of scamming. What got them to that stage in the first place? What can we do to prevent a child at 13 years old to actually not be involved in gang recruitment and so on? I don't think we can give up, just lift up our hands as a society and say, okay, when the horse gone through the gate, then we kill them all. That's the sentiment of a large number of Jamaican persons because the high crime rate is there. We're tired of it. We're fearful. But what we're saying is that social interventions and reform, it doesn't start at the end of when a child is in conflict with the law. We're saying it takes community-based interventions as early as possible within the early childhood institution, the primary school, the high schools. For those who are already in society, I go back to the community-based intervention. We have to start now rather than lamenting that it's too late. Because if we don't, it's going to get worse and worse.
Let me pose a question to you. You may recall, I'm sure you were very young at that stage, but I was in Parliament when it was done. Back in 1992, we amended the Offences Against the Person Act.
Yes.
To differentiate capital murder from other types of murder, right?
Yes.
To limit limit the kinds of murder cases that could attract the death penalty.
Yes.
So that, you know, if you kill your wife out in a fit of jealousy, you couldn't get the death penalty. You could get life imprisonment.
Yes.
But for those where the capital murder provisions apply, what would be the view of Jamaicans for Justice if the law were to be amended to say no parole? So if we're going to put you away for life, it is for life. You're going to die in there. You're not coming back out.
Well, the organization is not against for gruesome murders receiving life imprisonment without parole. We're certainly not against that.
Yeah.
And that is what we have stated, that where there can be the highest level of punishment without the recourse for death, based on the circumstances, then we would stand with the criminal justice system in that regard. Because at the very least, there is the possibility that if this person is found innocent at a later date, they can seek some release. That is what we have actually called for.
Yeah.
So again, this is not a feel-good thing that we're saying. All we're saying is that look at things very practically. Persons are saying it's a deterrent to crime. All indications suggest otherwise. As you stated earlier, someone who is in a fit of jealousy, who believes that they have been wronged by some other criminal associate, they're not going to be saying that the death penalty is there, so let me not kill this person. The reality is that you won't be getting that. So we have to look at what are some of the feasible and practical things that we need to get done to reduce the high crime rates in the country.
My position, as I said before, my position has kind of roamed over years. I mean, there was a time when I was all in favor of capital punishment, and I was opposed to it, and then I kind of found myself wobbling between the two.
Yes.
But I think the bottom line position, and I said it before in this discussion today, if we're looking for a deterrent to crime, if we're looking for something that will cause somebody who is planning to dust out somebody else to think not once, twice, three times, to think many, many times, and to ponder and perhaps to decide that they better not do it, it is not the severity of the punishment, even if that punishment is death by hanging. Yes. Or by firing squad. What is going to determine is whether or not there's a good chance that he will be caught, and the figures certainly don't suggest that he's likely to be caught. More than half of the people who commit murders in Jamaica are never caught, and of those who are caught, more than half of them are not convicted. Very often because witnesses. A senior police investigator, told me that the police is not short of information. Almost every murder, they have the information, they go on the ground, they get the information. But they are unable to, in many instances, they are unable to convert that information into evidence that can be presented to a court because witnesses don't come forward. I don't think that we are making enough use of technology as a substitute for witness statement, because testifying in a murder trial in Jamaica today, if you're testifying against an accused, that's a hazardous endeavor,
And I'm happy you said it, because what we have also called for, because last year I listened again to the Minister of Justice speak, And there is the witness protection program in Jamaica, but it is under-resourced. And if you can't relocate persons, not just within Jamaica, but perhaps in other countries within the Caribbean, and, you won't be getting people coming forward.
Yeah, but that is true. It's under-resourced. But it's also
Yes.
inconvenient, I mean, I've known people on the witness program.
Yes.
And, after the first 3 or 4 weeks of it, they said that they have to come off it because it is just turning their life upside down.
Yes.
Then
yes,
they can
yes.
no longer see their children. They can no longer go to the supermarket. They
And
can't live a life like that. And as you know, that case is probably going to be before the court for 4 or 5 years. They can't spend 4 or 5 years in that kind of...
Absolutely. And then some may not be as severe as that, but I think we've seen and continue to see a trust deficit between law enforcement and members within certain communities. And I think there are a myriad of issues that I think we have to drill down a little bit more around to see how we can get people to come forward and give the necessary testimony and support to see and to secure a conviction for those who are accused and who is in fact guilty. So again, the issue is
I'm not going to hold my breath on that because that is fraught with too many difficulties.
Too many difficulties, but I think we have to start.
It is a dangerous thing to do. Dangerous. I mean, I'm not seeking to discourage people from giving evidence, but I'm recognizing that if we are depending on their willingness to come forward as a means of gaining convictions, then I think that we're whistling in the dark because it's not going to work. We have to find a better way.
Yes,
and we have to rely put more reliance on technology and on live witness.
And the government is headed in the right direction where the technology and so on is concerned. But again, everything comes back down to resources.
That's right.
Power. So I think we should continue to champion those police reform things that we have spoken about, the strategies, and focus on it. But again, we have to balance it with being in the communities and doing a whole societal shift as we continue to focus on the practical exercises.
Ms. Mickel Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. That brings us to the end of the program. It's Jamaica Live, Bridge 99. Thanks to my producer, my engineer, the Bridge 99 crew. God's willing, I'll be back next week, Monday, to do it all over again, talk about something else, and hope that we help people to better understand the issues that are so important to us in Jamaica. God bless you. See you next week.